So in this video, we're just going over how to round some numbers in Python, because we saw in the last video that when we do divisions, it's not always the nicest answer that comes out. And we're going to look at how to generate some random numbers as well. So that might be helpful in some future lessons where we don't want to get input from the user all the time. We can just start generating some random numbers. So let's look at a decimal number here. So let's call it decimal 1, and it has some weird value to it. Okay, and let's say I didn't want that to just say display on the screen with all those decimal spots, but I wanted to have it display rounded, and it's pretty straightforward. We have a round command built into Python already, and you just have to tell it what number you want to round and how many decimal places to round it to. So usually that would be done in a print statement. So you might want to say like round, okay, and then what goes inside the brackets here is the number you want to round, and then a comma, and how many decimal spots you want to round to. So if I put a 2 there, okay, and print it, what did I do? Decimal 1. Okay, so there, pretty straightforward, right? It rounds it to 2 decimal spots. If I had 4, okay, it's just going to display to 4 decimal spots. Now what it doesn't do is when you're doing it like this, it does not actually change this number. Okay, so if I were to print out that number after doing that statement, right, it is still its full precision. So this is really good if you just wanted to display something that's rounded but not actually change the value in the memory. Okay. Now you could change it in memory by applying this round function and then overwriting the value of that variable, okay, in memory. So something like, so if I continue to have my same decimal spots here, if I did something like this, so round, actually that's not like that. Okay, let's say I have decimal 1, okay, I might say something like this: decimal 1 equals round decimal 1 to 2 decimal spots. Okay, so here's my original value. Okay, now I'm going to round it. So remember, the program starts on the right hand side of the equation, does what it does, and then stores it in the variable on the left side. Okay, so after this function has taken place, right, it will store that new rounded in decimal 1. So if I were to print it out, right, now that value is actually changed in memory from what it was before. It was all these decimal spots before, and now it is different. Okay, so depending on what you actually need the program to do, you might want to do either one of those cases. If you're just printing it out, then I would recommend that you just keep the precision, that whatever the calculation happens to be, and then just use these round statements in your prints at the end of your program when you're displaying the correct information. Now the other thing I wanted to talk about in this video was generating random numbers. So in order to do that, you actually have to import some more Python functions. So Python has its kind of standard library of functions that we've been using so far. There are lots of other libraries that exist, and you just have to tell your program that you want to insert those functions to be able to be used in your program. So we use what we call an import statement for this. So if we want to do random numbers, we need to import the random library. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of different functions in the random library that you could look up with a quick Google search. I'm going to just use 2 of them. I want to be able to generate a random set of integers between 2 values and a random set of floating point values between 2 values. Okay. So the function names are randint and uniform. Okay. Those are the functions that I'm going to be using, and it kind of goes like this. So I'm going to just make 2 numbers here. So let's say num1 is going to be a random integer value. Okay, so I have my import random at the start, and I'm going to say random dot. Okay, so this is referring to that library name. Okay. And then I'm going to call the function name that I want to do. So my function is called randint. Okay, and then what goes inside the brackets here is a range of values. So you'll put two numbers separated by a comma, and that will tell you what numbers you want to generate the random number between. So let's say 0 and 20. Okay, so that will generate a random number between 0 and 20, and it will be inclusive of 0 and 20. So you could get 0, you could get 20 show up. So if I were to print it, okay, and run my program, every time I run this program, I will get a different number. See, it got 0 that time, so it is inclusive of 0. Odds are I won't probably get 20 unless I ran it enough times. Right? But you can see a different number gets generated every single time I run the program. Okay? And it's always generating a random integer in that case. If you want to generate a random floating point number, then you're not using the rand int function. You're going to use a function called uniform. So random.uniform. I don't know, maybe we'll do between 15 and 20 for this one. Okay. So if I run that program, you're just getting a random decimal value. It's not doing any type of rounding or anything like that. If you wanted to round it to a specific number of decimal places afterwards, go ahead using what we just learned about how to round. But there is your random floating point value between 15 and 20, and that is also inclusive of 15 and 20, although I think the odds of it actually spitting out exactly 15 or exactly 20 would be very, 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 very minimal because it's generating a whole bunch of other decimals to go along with it. Okay, so we'll often use random numbers, especially later in the course when we start dealing with lists of data, because it would be tedious to kind of start typing out lots of different data into the program all the time, or things of chance like dice rolls in games, coin flips. You might want to generate random integers in order to simulate some type of program for that. So they can be fairly useful, and it's something that we should be able to do going forward.